We're going to bring in 2016 presidential candidate Donald Trump. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Okay, it's a busy day for you today because you are now set point to defend your comments about George W. Bush not preventing the terror attack on 9/11 and saying that you could have stopped that attack. Do you still stand by that statement?
Well, I think I could certainly have maybe done a lot better. I mean, look, if you look at it, Jeff, during the debate, said, my brother kept us safe. And I said to myself, I didn't want to embarrass him that night, but I said to myself, well, wait a minute, he kept us safe. We lost the World Trade Center on September 11th. I mean, that was his brother was president. And the World Trade Center came crashing down with 3,000 lives and all of the problems ensuing. It was a total catastrophe, the worst attack in the history of our country. And I think that if my immigration policies, because as you know, I've been by far the strongest on immigration of all of the candidates, of everybody, including the Democrats who are very weak on that. But if my immigration policies were in effect, I don't know that that would have happened because I have very, very strong immigration. I'm not just talking about the southern border. I'm talking generally speaking. Come into the country legally. But if my immigration policies were in effect, one other thing I have to say, if you remember back on that time, and I'm going to go check it today, but your CIA director, George Tenet, knew in advance that there was going to be an attack. He came out and said it later during the various things, but he knew in advance that there was going to be an attack.
Anyone who says Donald Trump's thin-skinned and if you counter him and he gets very mad at you don't understand, because you and I have disagreed on this for about 3 years. And we still talk and you still come on the show. So that is not true about you being thin-skinned. But I will say this. If you really wanted to stop bin Laden when he declared war on us in 1996, you would have taken him serious and killed him. We had multiple chances of him from 96 into 2000. We didn't take it. And I will say this. They said bin Laden determined to attack the U.S. at home. Didn't say where, didn't say who, didn't even see this plot. I think in retrospect, Donald Trump, if you analyze what happened, unless President Trump walked in and said, I need the FBI director here, I need the CIA director here. If you guys don't start merging and purging lists and getting on the same page, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Unless you did that, you wouldn't have stopped the attack, because that was the problem. They both knew that these guys were here, but they didn't even know what they were capable of because the agencies weren't talking to each other.
Well, Brian, I'm okay with that, and I agree with everything you say. The only thing I will say, you have to, again, go back into that history, which was a very dark and sad history. The FBI, the NSC, and the CIA were not talking to each other. If you remember that, they didn't like each other. Everybody was messed up. The CIA director, George Tenet, again, he stated that there was absolutely no communication between the three primary agencies, and that was a really big problem. I mean, they weren't talking to each other. And now it's hard to remember back that far, but I have a very good memory. They were not talking to each other, and it came out as a major problem. Now, then you go back just a little bit further and advance it. Why did we attack Iraq? Because when this happened, number one, there were no weapons of mass destruction.
But everyone thought there were, though. You know the Egyptians.
There were no weapons of mass destruction, number one. And number two, and you know, I mean, there are many other things, but when the terrorists dropped off their families, okay, those families a couple of days before, maybe even the day before the attack, those families went back to Saudi Arabia. They didn't go back to Iraq. They went back to Saudi Arabia. So why did we attack Iraq? Now we have the mess where the whole Middle East is screwed up because we destroyed Iraq.
Mr. Trump, I'm going to just point you here to Pete Hegseth, who is actually facing more.
Absolutely. I mean, you're wanting, Mr. Trump, you're wanting to fight this battle on advantageous terrain vis-a-vis Iraq. Although if you're pointing back to what you talked about before, only 2 of the 19 hijackers were here illegally, had visas that were not legal at the time. How would your program specifically had actually prevented this, to Brian's point, actually prevented these men from coming to America and perpetrating the attack that, while there may have been some intelligence, was certainly not clear?
Because my standards were much higher for visas, and if you look at what I'm doing, my standards are much higher for visas, number one. Number two, we'd have a massive whistleblower system, which you have to have. I mean, it's hard to believe you had these 18 or 19 people, and nobody knew what they were doing. I mean, they were working they were all over the place. They were learning about airplanes. They were flying airplanes. I mean, you have to have some kind of a whistleblower system for this stuff so that we find out about it. We had no whistleblower system. But when you look back, I mean, look, after the attack, we did the wrong thing because we went after a country, we destabilized it. We don't like Saddam Hussein, but it was a hell of a lot better than, I mean, we've spent $2 trillion in Iraq. We have thousands of lives. We have nothing for it.
A couple of things. If looking at Iraq has been debated, there's books and books on 9/11 and the 9/11 report that goes into detail. If you have the 2015 mindset and you could put it in 2000, a lot of the stuff you're saying is valid. But if you put us back in 2000, you look at the debates between Gore and Bush, they weren't even talking Al Qaeda. And in the big picture, the systems that were put in place during the Bush years we're still benefiting from in terms of tracking down Al Qaeda, being able to listen.
Do you deny that?
And until Edward Snowden came in and exposed all of it.
Do you deny
Elizabeth, I can only speak to myself. If you go back to 2003 and 2004, now I wasn't a politician, so I didn't get the kind of publicity, because it wasn't a subject. I had a huge article in Reuters saying, don't attack Iraq because you're going to destabilize the Middle East. Iran is going to take over the Middle East. And I got a lot of credit for that. Later on, I got a lot of credit for that, but I was very much opposed to it. Now, I'm the most militaristic person there is.
What does that mean, you're the most militaristic person in the race? Mr. Trump, what does it mean you're the most militaristic person in the race?
I want to have a strong military so that nobody messes with us, and I'll have the strongest military, but you have to know when to use it. When you did Iraq, when you knocked the power from Iraq, you had these two equal powers, Iran and Iraq. When you took away, when you decapitated one, the other one is now just taking over the Middle
Trump,
East.
there's not one thing you're saying that's inaccurate. However, you also should understand, too, that to say Bush lied is a Michael Moore line. To look at Hosni Mubarak, who told us they were there, to England, France, every intelligence network said they had weapons of mass destruction. It's where they were and how much they had. When it exploded, everything got exposed and unwound, we could say look back and say, well, there's no weapons of destruction. But for 10 years, they're shooting at our planes, creating havoc in the region. In retrospect, there are some things that are true. But in the big picture, I have this question for you. Why would you pick this argument? Because this is a Michael Moore, leftist, I hate everything Republican argument. Why would you take this? Like, what benefit is it?
Actually, I didn't take this argument. I'm not blaming anybody. I don't like to go back and blame. I like to look to the future. I'm not blaming anybody. The only thing I said, he said we were safe. Well, the fact is we had the worst attack in the history of our country during his reign. Jeb said we were safe during his reign. That wasn't true. And that's the only thing I pointed out. And I'm not blaming anybody. And I'm not blaming George Bush. Although, if you look at his three primary agencies, they hated each other. They weren't talking. It wasn't that they weren't talking by mistake. They hated each other. Well, and a good leader would have made sure they get along and they talk and lots of other things happen. With all of that being said, I'm not blaming anybody. But the statement was made that at the debate, during my brother's reign, essentially, during my brother's reign, we were safe. Well, we weren't safe because the World Trade Center came down and 3,000 lives were lost, and lots of other bad things happened.
Now, post 9/11, many Americans would say that President George W. Bush did everything in his power and did indeed keep us safe, free from another attack. You would not deny that, would you?
Well, we attacked a different country, which I think was a wrong country. I think attacking Iraq was a huge mistake. I mean, I think that was a huge mistake.
Did he keep us safe at home?
Well, we haven't had a major problem at home. I agree with that. I never disagreed with that. But we attacked a country. We spent $2 trillion attacking a country, and you know what we have for it right now? Zero.
Well, we could have had a lot more. But you guys haven't said that too. That we won that war. The surge worked. It's like an all-military escapades with America. We get it wrong in the beginning. We get it right at the end. And it was thrown in the street. But I want to bring it to something less impact, but means a lot for this race. NBC has said, we want Donald Trump to host Saturday Night Live. Right. Now, there's Latino groups are putting pressure on NBC to drop you as the host. In fact, here's the quote from this National Hispanic Leadership Group. We put that back up. Sure. We're appalled that you would enable Trump's hateful speech for nothing more than a ratings ploy and ask that you rescind the SNL invitation. What's your reaction?
These groups are out for themselves. I know all about these groups. I'm leading in the polls with the Hispanics. I mean, you look at Nevada, I'm leading in the polls with the Hispanics because I produce jobs and they know it. I have thousands of Hispanics that work for me. My relationships to Hispanics is, I think, better than those groups. Those groups are looking to fundraise. They're looking, I know all about those groups. I had one of them come up to my office. Practically, the first thing he said was, "Gee whiz, would you like to join?" And I said, "How much is it?" I think he said from $25,000 to $2 million.
But NBC already turned on you and dumped you once. Are you concerned they're going to do it again?
They dumped the Miss Universe pageant. And by the way, on The Apprentice, they were begging me to do it. And I couldn't do it because I'm running for president. And they were begging me. And did you know they renewed it? And they were begging me. And by the way, they'd take me right now and they'd get rid of Arnold Schwarzenegger if I wanted to do it. That I can tell you. But we chose Arnold Schwarzenegger. As you know, I have a very big piece of that show, which a lot of people don't know. We took Arnold Schwarzenegger, put him in there, and I hope he's going to do well. But they did drop the Miss Universe. I then had, as you know, I sued them. I ended up buying their piece. I ended up then selling it for a tremendous amount of money, and it came out very nicely. Now, as far as the Hispanics, these groups, I know these groups. If you talk to these groups, you will find, what are they looking for? It's the same all over.
Sure.
So I think that, frankly, I think the ratings are going to be through the roof. Lorne Michaels is a very smart guy. NBC are very smart people.
So they're not going to ban you. They're not going to drop you. You've confirmed that with them?
I mean, yeah. If they want to do a show with 1/3 the ratings, they might do that. I mean, you know, that's no. I don't see that at all. I know these groups, and I will tell you, I have thousands of Hispanics working for me. They love me. I'm winning polls with Hispanics
Everything.
in Nevada. You know, if you look, Brian, you look right now at Nevada. Right now, I just won the poll yesterday.
You did.
I just won the poll with the Hispanics.
Right. It's a remarkable story, and even Chris Wallace said this weekend he could see you becoming president. Thanks so much for joining us, Donald Trump.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.